Okay, welcome to the next segment of Cry the Beloved Country. We're going to begin Book 3 with Chapter 30. On the train ride home, people begin to ask Khumalo about his sister and his son. He is reluctant to talk about them and reads his Bible instead of engaging in conversation. And I think we can understand that. I mean, he's pretty embarrassed and ashamed about the whole situation, so I don't think I'd want to talk to people about it either. Khumalo tells his wife the bare minimum when she meets them at the train station. His wife welcomes the girl and her nephew as her own children. Khumalo finds out that the valley is in desperate need of rain. Not only that, but people know about what Absalom did. However, everyone is ecstatic that their Mfundisi is back. So he thought he would, get contempt from the people, or people would kind of shun him for what his son did, but they've shown the absolute opposite. They have a lot of love for him, and they're glad that he's back. The narrator highlights the thought that the children should call and dance now while they still can, because changes are coming. Innocence will be removed. So that's a pretty powerful statement. So he's looking at the kids and saying, you know what? Go ahead and dance. Go ahead and sing and call out now, because it won't be much longer that you'll be able to do that. Khumalo contemplates leaving Xxxii because of the shame, but his friend tells him that no one wants him to go. He gives his wife the money from Simangu and says they can buy new clothes. He tells her all about Simangu and all the good things that he's done to help Khumalo while he was in Johannesburg. Chapter 31. Khumalo decides to speak to the chief and the headmaster of Xxxii about making some changes to restore Xxxii. Khumalo comments on how the white men have knocked down the chiefs and then put them back where they wanted them, with less power and with less land. But even though these chiefs have less power and less land, they still have the big ego. They're still very arrogant, as we see in his own chief. Khumalo proposes to the chief that they try to keep some young people in Xxxii by taking better care of the land. The chief, or Nkosi as he calls him, as the Zulus say, told Khumalo that he would discuss the matter further with the white inspector and the magistrate, and a magistrate is just a judge who makes laws. Khumalo then speaks to the headmaster, but he's little help too. He keeps talking about, well, we teach people how to farm, but we're only in school, there's not much we can do. So he really isn't much help to Khumalo in that aspect. As Khumalo's sitting in his home, a small white boy rides up on a red horse, and it's eerily similar to Khumalo's memories of Arthur Jarvis when he used to ride past Khumalo's church as a little boy on a red horse. But Khumalo calls the little boy Inkosana, which means little master. The boy asks to see inside of Khumalo's home. The boy speaks some words in Zulu to show that he is learning, and he says that he will come back to see Khumalo because he wants to keep practicing his Zulu. The little boy learns that children are dying in the land for lack of milk. We realize that this boy is Arthur's son, and we hope that he takes up his father's fight for justice between the South Africans. The final section of the chapter shows us what took effect after that conversation between Khumalo and the little boy. Mr. Jarvis sent milk down to Khumalo so that it may be given to the children who need it so they won't die. Mr. Jarvis plans to do this until the land recovers. So obviously what Khumalo told the little boy touched his heart enough for him to go speak to his grandfather. And we know that Jarvis now, his heart has been softened. He's been enlightened as to the plight of the black natives. So now he's more willing to help out. And that ends chapter 31. Chapter 32. Khumalo receives letters from Johannesburg from the lawyer, Mr. Carmichael, who writes him to tell him that there will be no mercy for Absalom. Absalom will be hanged. Another letter comes from Absalom, and he basically says the same thing to his parents. Says that he knows that he will be hanged, he won't get mercy, but he does say that he's being treated well in the prison. And he also asks about his child, whether it's been born yet and all that stuff. He doesn't ask about the girl, he just asks about the child. When Khumalo goes outside to look at a few passing clouds that might bring rain, he noticed Jarvis, the magistrate, the chief, and some other men talking and surveying the land. After much discussion and planting of stakes in the ground, the group breaks up because of the oncoming rain. Jarvis joins Khumalo at the church, At first, they're pretty quiet. They don't really say much to each other. But Kamalu lets Jarvis read the letter from the lawyer. And he simply said that, he would remember. Mr. Jarvis said, okay, I understand the situation. I'll remember that day. Kamalu was so nervous around Jarvis that he forgot to thank him for all of the good deeds that Jarvis has done for him by sending the milk and, putting the stakes down, even though Kamalu still isn't sure what the stakes are for. No one really knows what the stakes were for, why they were placed in the ground. But at the end of the chapter, it's kind of funny because it talks about how the people in the village are just kind of looking at these stakes and they're like, what does this do? What does this do? And the kids are all like pulling on or pretending to pull on the stake like, oh, this is so heavy. I can't pull it out. But one of the little boys, he pulls one out by mistake and his mother's like, you shame me by what you've done. And then some of the men in the village, they come and they put the stake back in the ground and they like cover it up with dirt to try to make it look like nothing ever happened. So that was kind of amusing to me, at least. But that's the end of that chapter, chapter 32. Okay, my beloveds, here we are at the very end of Cry the Beloved Country, and this will be the final segment covering chapters 33 through 36. So chapter 33. Jarvis went to Pretoria on business, so everyone has to wait to see what's going to happen with the sticks in the ground. They still don't know what it's for. The girl is happy in her new home, and Gertrude's son no longer asks about her. Let's see. Arthur's son comes back to visit Kamalu, and they enjoy each other's company. They're laughing and talking in Zulu, and Kamalu's making the little boy feel all good because he knows some words in Zulu, and he's making him practice saying sentences and things like that. So they're really having a good conversation, and they have a connection. The young boy says that he will be going back to Johannesburg when his grandpa gets back. And just as they're talking, Jarvis drives up, and he actually drops off this young man who has come to teach the people how to farm and change the landscape. He'll teach the people how to fertilize the earth, how to plant trees, and how to build a dam. So now we know what the stakes were for. They're to mark out where the dam is supposed to go. He tells Kamalu that they will also have to end the custom of paying for their wives in cattle because they can't afford to. The way that they're taking care of the cattle or trying to take care of the cattle, it's eating up the pasture land. So they have to figure out a different system. Kamalu's excited and tells this new demonstrator that he hopes to see Xxxii shine again because he's seen enough destruction in his life. He wants to see something grow. He wants to see Xxxii turn into something fruitful into the dilapidated condition that it's in right now. The young boy comes back to say farewell to Kamalu because when he saw his grandpa told him, okay, it's time to go back to Johannesburg. So the little boy, thinking so highly of Kamalu, he actually comes back to tell him goodbye. So that was pretty sweet. Chapter 34. Confirmation Day. Confirmation, I believe that's more so a Catholic tradition, but it may apply to some other churches. But what it means is that baptized believers, usually children, that's when they confirm their faith and they're added as full members of the church. So they're going to have a ceremony on this day, and people are gathered at the church for this event. They're waiting on the bishop to come. Rain clouds are setting in, and people don't know whether they should be glad or sorry. Glad for the rain or sorry that it's going to rain on this special occasion. We find out that Mrs. Jarvis has died, and Mr. Jarvis has retreated into his own silence. Kamalu writes him a letter of condolence. This is a typical archetype in literature, when you have storms and you have rain, and what does it mean? It usually means a bad omen, something bad is going to happen or it has happened, which in this case, Mrs. Jarvis has died. The bishop comes to confirm the children, and it continues to rain. Afterwards, the bishop sits down to talk with Kamalu. He tells Kamalu that he should leave Xxxii because of all of the negative things that have transpired in Kamalu's life with his family in Johannesburg. And the fact that the father of the man that Absalom has murdered is his neighbor. So he's like, just for that fact alone, your son killed his son. So that just makes the whole situation just too weird. I think you should move away. Kamalu reminds the bishop of all the good things that Mr. Jarvis has done for Kamalu and the village. The bishop is still adamant, though. He would prefer that Kamalu and his family go somewhere where his personal business isn't known by everyone. He wants to relieve stress off of Kamalu because of his age and his fragile state. He wants to send Kamalu to Peter Maritzburg, where he won't have to worry about rebuilding the church. It's so funny, but while they yet spake, a little boy came up with a message for Kamalu from Mr. Jarvis. He thanked Kamalu for his kind words and told him that Mrs. Jarvis was suffering before she found out that Arthur died. So in essence, Mr. Jarvis was assuring Kamalu that Arthur's death and Absalom's role in it didn't cause her to die of grief. She was sick anyway. She was sick before, and her illness just got the better of her. So that actually brings a little peace to Kamalu. He also tells Kamalu that one of her last wishes was to help rebuild Kamalu's church building. And it's so funny and it's so ironic because that's exactly what the bishop was talking to Kamalu about at that point in the story. Kamalu exclaims, "This is from God! This is from God!" And he lets the bishop read the letter. The bishop is incredulous at first, and after hearing of how Mr. Jarvis provided milk for the kids and how he planned on building a dam for the valley, he said, "You know what? This is extraordinary. I've never heard of anything like this. This is extraordinary." So basically, he retracts his statement and says that Kamalu shouldn't leave Xxxii, that it's probably not in God's will for Kamalu to leave Xxxii. So the rain passes and the sky is black with promise. There is hope beyond the horizon. This chapter ends with some people making a wreath and writing a card of bereavement for Mr. Jarvis. Chapter 35. The young agricultural demonstrator, who happens to be a young black man, if you were wondering, he teaches the people farming techniques. Some people are upset, and they don't say anything. They're quiet, but you could tell they're upset because they have to give up their land to make room for the dam and some of the other things that they have planned to restore the valley, so it could be better for farming and better for taking care of their cattle and just to benefit the community. So some people have to sacrifice a lot, and they're not really happy about that. Though some people are upset, the narrator tells us that the valley has some spirit and now it has some life in it again. People are talking and there is promise on the horizon. There is hope. While Kamalu and the demonstrator are talking about the work there, the demonstrator says that soon they won't need the milk from the white man. Kamalu chastises him, saying, that he should be thankful that the white man is trying to help the natives here. Where would they be right now without the white man's help? The demonstrator explains to Kamalu that he respects the white men in power, but basically it's their fault that communities like Xxxii are the way that they are. He sees this as a repayment, not a gift, but a repayment, a responsibility that the white men have for causing this poor situation in the first place. Kamalu is uncomfortable with this kind of conversation. The demonstrator explains that even though the valley will be restored, it still won't be enough to support too many more people. As the children grow up, some will still have to leave. He explains that, he works for the land. He works for Africa, not a man. And again, Kamalu just advises him not to hate and not to desire power because he's seen what that can do to a man, referencing back to his brother John. Kamalu contemplates his life and thinks that he is too old for these new and disturbing thoughts. People call him a white man's dog. Well, he says, that was the way his life had been lived, and that was the way he would die. Kamalu is not a man to be ashamed of accepting help wherever it comes from. Some people think that's bad. He's, like I said, the white man's dog, but Kamalu doesn't care. He sees kind people trying to help out less fortunate people. And that ends chapter 35. Chapter 36, the final chapter. Kamalu takes a trip into the mountains. He's done it 3 times before in his life when he's been deeply troubled. It seems to be a place of meditation for him. The mountain is called Imoyeni, in the winds. When you look down into the valley of the Umzimkulu, you look down on one of the fairest scenes of Africa. So it's very beautiful from up there. On his journey up the mountain, Khumalo meets up with Jarvis, who tells him he will send plans for the new church building. They talk about how similar Arthur's son is to Arthur when he was a boy. Jarvis says that he will be leaving Notsheni to live in Johannesburg with his daughter and her children. He's lost his son, he's lost his wife, he's there on the farm by himself. So I'm pretty sure that he thought about it and he was like, you know what? I wasn't as close to my son as I would have liked to have been, but I do want to be close to my grandkids, at least my grandson. So that's just my thinking of his thought process. I can't say that I blame him. The two men share a special moment. Khumalo thanks Jarvis for his kindness, and Jarvis thanks Khumalo for helping him to change, to step out of the darkness, as he said. Jarvis leaves, and Khumalo continues to the summit of the mountain. There he remembers his son. He then prays and confesses his own sins. He then began thanking God for the blessings he's witnessed. He can't believe that God allowed him to experience such pain, but then have it turn into such gladness. He falls asleep, and when he awakens, he thinks of his son and how he would die this morning. He prays that Christ will be with Absalom. His thoughts turn to the racial tensions in Africa, his beloved country. He contemplates why white men fear the blacks' need for freedom and respect. You know, he still doesn't quite understand. Well, he understands in a way why the white people are afraid of the black people, because the black people outnumber the white people. But he still doesn't know why they're so afraid that the black people want to lead a normal life. They don't want to be treated as second-class citizens. They just want to be treated as people and get their fair share. So he kind of sees both sides of it, but he doesn't agree with, the fear of the white people. And then he thinks back to a comment that Simangu made, which also put some fear into him. Simangu had once said that one day, when they turn to loving, meaning the white people, when they turn to loving, they will find that the black people are turning to hatred. And that prophecy kind of sits in Khumalo's mind, and that worries him a little bit. He doesn't want that to come true. His mind goes back to his son. What is he doing now? Is someone with him? Is, Father Vincent with him? Is Simangu with him on a day that he's about to die? Is he standing strong, or is he giving in to his fear? So all these thoughts are running through Khumalo's mind right now. Khumalo prays as the sun rises in the east and as his son is being hanged. For it is the dawn that has come, as it has come for 1,000 centuries, never failing. But when that dawn will come, of our emancipation from the fear of bondage and the bondage of fear, why, that is a secret. When will South Africa be free? That is the secret. And that, my friends, ends chapter 36, ends Cry, the Beloved Country.